Today on the EOR podcast, our guest is where science meets soul. Lisa Franz holds a master's in exercise science, health promotion, and nutrition. But what really sets her apart is how she helps people transform their relationship with food and self. As the founder of Nutrition Coaching and Life and host of the Nutrition and Life podcast, Lisa's not just dishing out diet tips. She is coaching real, lasting change. Lisa Franz, welcome to the EOR podcast. Let's go. Lisa Franz, welcome to the EOR podcast. Super excited to have you here today. Like I said in the pre-show, I geek out on nutrition and health and fitness. And even though at the age of 54, I come from a background of college sports, professional sports, the nutrition and health and fitness back in the 90s and 90s was a little bit different. Back then, it was just lift heavy and eat lots. So things have changed over the last 30 to 40 years. And that's why I love having people like you on the show. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Quinn. It's a pleasure to be here. And as I said before we hit record, I'm certain we have a lot of things to talk about. As you mentioned before, also everything is connected. Our performance at work, how we show up for our families, how we show up for our friends, and literally everything else. So very, very excited to touch on this topic and to share with your audience what I can contribute.
Excellent. Great to have you here. So let's start here. What inspired the transitions? You went to school, you got your education, incredible background in health and nutrition. How did you translate that, and what inspired the transition to now working with people one-to-one or groups of people when it comes to, better eating, better healthy lifestyles, exercise, and so forth?
Well, Quinn, let me tell you, it wasn't a straight transition. So even though I've always been passionate about physiology, prevention, sort of living healthy for a long time, for me, it's always been more about the quality of life rather than just the duration of life. I studied exercise science and nutrition out of high school, but then I was kind of like, what do I even do with this? I don't want to be a personal trainer. I don't want to work as a clinical nutritionist when it's kind of just with people that have diabetes and they're not really changing their habits after all. And so I actually took a detour and I became a police officer in New Zealand for some time. But after a while, I realized that really wasn't my passion. Like even while I was at work, I was always thinking about my training afterwards. I was coaching people in CrossFit at the time on the side. I was helping people with nutrition. And so I was like, you should really pursue your passion, Lisa. This is what you want to do. So actually, alongside of doing my work as a police officer, I got some more certifications and I kind of branched out and looked into, can I do this remotely? Like, is there such a thing as helping people with nutrition just from anywhere in the world? Because I found the idea to just work remotely super enticing. I've always loved traveling. I wanted to, just help people all over the globe, really. And so I found out that nutrition coaching was actually a profession, that people did that for a living, and not just in the sense of, oh, I'm ill, I need help with my nutrition now that I found out I've got diabetes, but more in the sense of how can I just show up as an even healthier version of mine. Like, even though I'm not sick right now, I want to be better. And as we said before our recording as well, like that idea of I can always, even though things are good, I know I can always be better. I always love that concept of just chasing a better version of yourself while you're, of course, content and proud of who you are already, but at the same time, not settling for mediocrity. And so as I learned more about nutrition coaching and online personal training, I sort of slowly transitioned out of the police work and have been a full-time nutrition coach since 2019 now. For the first couple of years, I worked for a company because I truly wanted to just learn more about coaching. I wanted to become a better coach as opposed to having to think and focus on marketing, client acquisition, etc. But yeah, after a couple of years, I felt like I've kind of gotten a good insight into how business systems work, and I wanted to start my own thing. And so have had my own business now since 2021. And I just love working with people all over the globe because truly it's so interesting for me to see how different cultures even approach health and fitness and nutrition from a different angle, how different kinds of foods affect us differently, how everyone's stance is in regards to nutrition and in regards to training as well, and of course mindset. So it's been super, super rewarding. And I guess to bring it back to the original question as to what inspired me to do so as well, and that application transition, it comes from a personal struggle too, because even though I've never been like really overweight or really had any big health issues, I have gone through very numerous diets, such as the paleo diet, low carb, low fat, you name it. And I always felt really, really restricted with it. And I just was planning out my weekend binges. I felt super guilty after going to a friend's birthday and having cake there because I thought sugar is just the devil itself. And eventually I thought to myself, this cannot be the reason I'm here on this earth. I truly believe I'm here to enjoy my life, but at the same time, I knew that there has to be a way to enjoy life and be happy in my body. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And thankfully, then I learned about the laws of thermodynamics, and that essentially, yes, we want to eat 80 to 90% whole foods and good quality foods and fuel our bodies. But if from time to time we have a little, like a glass of wine, or if we have a slice of pizza, those 10, 20%, they are truly meant to enjoy life a bit more flexibly. And I don't need to feel guilty about it as long as I know how to moderate the quantities and how to balance it out with the good nutrition otherwise. So I truly wanted to just spread that message and share that with other people, because I myself have found it so relieving and have really embraced food freedom since then. And it's given me really even more quality of life.
I love that term food freedom, because I think a lot of when it comes to nutrition for everybody individually, everyone's different. Everyone has a different metabolism. Everyone has a different physiology, and it's important for them to understand how their body works. A very simple example is I'll be 4 pounds over what I think I'd like to be my goal weight, and my wife will laugh and go, "Yeah, all you do is you miss 2 meals, and there it is. You lose 4 pounds." And she'll starve herself for a week and gain a pound. So it's about education, though, and I think a lot of people need to understand how they individually work, and then getting together with someone like you can help that. But a lot of times people don't have the financial resources to work with a personal coach, nutritionist. They don't know where to find the information, although the internet is a great wealth of information, but it can be overwhelming. How do you choose to educate people, not only one-to-one, your clients, but through the different social media platforms that you use? How do you choose to educate people on what's right for them? How do you educate them?
Yeah, I love that point and that message, because truly I couldn't agree more. And I always start with the saying or overarching theme of methods are many, principles are few. Methods change often and principles never do. And so what I mean by that is there are overlying things that everyone should consider. So for example, vegetables are good for you. Which ones? We're going to get into
Universal truth.
because that's a bit more individual. Protein is good for you. How much exactly is we're going to get into later, because that kind of depends on you. How much should you eat? There are certain principles. Everybody should move their body, everybody should hydrate, and so on. They never change. But the methods, how you go about achieving a calorie deficit, how you go about your movement, they are varied, because again, like every person is different. Every person has a different personal preference as to how they want to move their body, if they prefer carbs over fats, if they enjoy eating animal products, or if they prefer out of ethical reasons to live a vegan lifestyle. Like all of this is what I mean by methods are many, principles are few. Methods change often and principles never do. So we need to all adhere to the laws of thermodynamics, and we all need to cover our micronutrient bases. But how we go about the specifics, like for example, also meal frequency, something people often get hung up over, like, should I eat 6 times per day or twice? Do I need to do intermittent fasting or not? All these sorts of things. very, very individual. So that's kind of like my basis of how I like to create my content and educate people. So I personally have a podcast also where I like to give people that general information, that those overarching principles that might apply to everybody. But I always say, hey, there's a caveat. If you are, a highly stressed person and your hormones are out of whack, intermittent fasting is probably not for you. If you're someone who's not really hungry in the morning, super busy lifestyle, but you enjoy fewer but larger meals, intermittent fasting could work really well for you. So sometimes we go into the more niche sort of things in the podcast as well, or over my Instagram, I try to educate people as well. But I do always make sure that I caveat it by saying, like, if you find someone who is super dogmatic about something and says everyone needs to do X, that's a red flag. You should kind of like listen very closely and think about it twice if you choose this person as your teacher or not, because if it's such a hard and fast rule ever, chances are this is not going to apply to everybody. Just like I often like to give the comparison from nutrition to finances. So if someone says everyone needs to invest in X, everyone needs to go about their savings in this way, that's not going to apply to every single person around the globe. Like, generally speaking, should we earn more than what we spend? Yes, that's a good principle that most people should probably adhere to if they want to have a little bit of savings or accumulate wealth over time. But you can't just say like everyone should invest in this particular thing at this particular rate and so on. So yeah, I sometimes find that drawing that comparison can be helpful for people. But you're completely right. We cannot educate on social media platforms for one specific person, especially if they have a specific thing. Let's just say several of my clients, they might be kind of going through a menopause transition, and then the same advice is not going to apply to them that applies for a 20-year-old guy whose college has no other obligations other than training and going to school. And that person's going to have a very different lifestyle than the 50-year-old mom that has a full-time job and God knows what other responsibilities.
Yeah. So let me challenge you a little bit. What are one or two, or maybe you can come up with a third, universal truths about nutrition? And so I'll give you what I think would be a universal truth. Hydration. We need everyone on the planet, I would think, needs to hydrate properly, meaning taking in enough water on a daily basis. And it doesn't mean it has to be right down to the, the milliliter, but that would be a universal truth, so to speak. Give me one or two other universal truths that you think could be applied to humans in general for them to follow and improve their nutrition.
I would say following a 80-90% whole foods based diet is beneficial for everyone on this planet.
Find whole foods for us, Lisa, just because I know there's going to be people that don't know what that means.
We could also say minimally processed foods. So yes, oats, of course, they're a little bit processed, so that's totally fine. But we can sometimes think of it more as in like single ingredient food. So if you look at the packaging of something and it has like one, maybe two or three ingredients, I would classify that as a whole food, like something like natural yogurt. That classifies for me as a whole food. Something like rice, even though it's processed a little bit, classifies as a whole food, or olive oil or things like that.
Okay.
The more ingredients, generally
An egg.
speaking, the more processed. Yeah, an egg, exactly. Like things that you can buy just whole as it is, broccoli, a piece of steak, potato. Yeah, that would be a whole food.
Because I think some people mistake Whole Foods for like I'm like literally going to the store Whole Foods,
right?
And it's like getting super organic and granola. But you're saying single ingredient items or 1 to 2.
Yeah, minimally processed sort of thing, I would say. Again, yeah, I would say everybody on the planet benefits from having that as a foundation, and then adding the extra 10-20%, however they like.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one universal truth. The second universal truth would be that everybody on the planet, in my opinion, benefits from some sort of daily movement. It can be walking. It can be a body weight exercise, could be going swimming. I'm not also getting hung up on the duration, but some sort of daily movement. I would say for the majority of people, 30 to 60 minutes of some kind of movement. It doesn't need to be continuous. You could do 10 minutes in the morning,
Okay.
10 minutes for your lunch, could be even while you're doing your house chores. But I just think overall speaking, we are becoming less and less active, and that is having negative repercussions on our body. And so incorporating more movement, however you like to do that, I think is beneficial for pretty much everybody also.
Okay. Interesting. Um, you've had a international experience from Germany to New Zealand. I don't know if you spent a lot of time in North America and the United States or in Canada, but what do you see are the biggest differences between the mindset of people as far as nutrition goes, or even movement, um, in the places where you've lived, and maybe what you see or hear from across the ocean here in North America?
Sure. Yeah, and I have actually spent quite a bit of time in the US. I spent a whole year in Nebraska while I was
Oh wow.
in high school, yeah, out of all places. But since then, I've been to 23 of the other 50 or 23 more states other than Nebraska as well.
Okay.
And I've actually, for the last 6 years, since I really spent them as a digital nomad, overall, over the course of my life, I've accumulated 53 countries I've traveled to. So I do have
Wow.
other broad vision. And I will say that generally speaking, the cool thing I have discovered throughout my travels is that really, as a human race, we really have more in common than we have and then things that separate us, which is wonderful. And I
Nice.
also will say that, for example, right now I'm living in Bolivia. I'm speaking to you from South America. I have pretty much only had positive experiences. When I first went to places like Mexico and Colombia, my mom, even though they're well used to me traveling a lot, they were like, "Are you sure you want to do this? Do you have health insurance? Do you have insurance for other things? Like be careful." But really, people are wonderful. They love helping you. The foods I have been able to enjoy have been absolutely incredible. I will say, in terms of differences, I have noticed every time, and I've just been to the US, to Missouri and Florida and Vegas, actually last month, or March and April. And one thing that always stands out to me, unfortunately, is how difficult it really is to move more. So, for instance, I went to this gym and I wanted to go to Starbucks, which was like I could literally see the Starbucks from the exit of the gym, but it was on the other side of the highway. And there was no physical way for me to get across from the gym to the Starbucks by foot. Like I would have had to do like 30-minute detour or whatever. So I literally had to go into the car, drive for like 5 minutes, do that loop, and get to this. I
Yeah.
was like, how is this possible? And this is just one example because I mean, I wanted to go, I love going for walks. Yes, you can, of course, find hiking trails and all of that. But if I compare that to European cities, or even like here where I'm at in Bolivia, everything is a lot more laid out for just day-to-day life by foot. And that might be a small impression, but again, I've been to various cities in the US, and just generally speaking, overall, life doesn't seem to be laid out as much for just regular day-to-day activity. For instance, here, I don't actually need to try to get my 8 to 10,000 steps. It just kind of happens naturally. Like I walk to the gym, I walk to the grocery store, I walk to my cafe, and so on. And by the end of the day, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm at whatever. Cool, that's awesome. Whereas when I was in the US, I really had to make a purposeful effort. And I think that's just a little bit it's sad. It makes it harder for people because you need to like walk on the treadmill or pack up your kids and go to a walking trail, as opposed to just having that naturally. And
So
it,
accessibility, just
yeah,
accessibility of
ability, absolutely. And
yeah.
again, to give you another example, my grandma in Germany, I'm fortunate to still have her around. She's 89, and she takes her bicycle to get the weekly groceries for her and my grandpa. And like literally, she'll balance things out on the one side of her handlebar. She'll have like milk and whatever on the other side. She'll have other things to stabilize, but it just exemplifies that she's very, very active, and she's not the only one. Like, this is just, you're more active in your day-to-day life, and I think that that's a big part of keeping her healthy as well, just more naturally. The other thing on that kind of side is that I have also noticed, of course, portion sizes being quite a bit larger in the US than, for instance, here. It's incredible. Like, even if you just look at a burger, or even if you go to McDonald's here or McDonald's in the US, the portion sizes will be different. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So it makes it harder for people to stop, because maybe like me, you've been brought up in the way of you need to finish your plate. And so you still have that within you where you want to eat everything. And it's just a lot harder to just stop after three-quarters of a burger than eating the whole thing. So it doesn't make it easier. On the flip side, there are things that are actually, in my opinion, a little bit easier in the US, and that would be, for instance, availability of things. So like here, buying something like Greek yogurt is like a luxury product. Costs like, if I calculate the difference in currency, it's like $10 for like I don't know how many ounces that is, but for like a regular jar. So
Sure.
people just don't buy it. Or whey protein, something that's so basic. There is a supplement store not too far from here, and they said they haven't been able to get whey protein into the country for the last 2 months. So,
Wow.
like, if I
Wow.
tell that to something in the US, it's like, that's incredible, because literally every time you go to a grocery store, I'm overwhelmed, because there's like 30 different protein bars, and I
Yeah.
don't know which one to choose. So, everything comes with kind of pros and cons. Um, and you just sort of have to pick your battles, and I guess try to make the smartest decisions overall. And for exactly that reason, I find having like some overarching principles, like, okay, your plate should consist of half the plate vegetables, a quarter of a plate lean protein source, and then some healthy carbs and fats to kind of make up for the rest. That can be a good overarching principle, whether you're in Thailand, whether you're in Italy, or whether you are in Alaska or so.
Yeah, lots of differences, but like you said, there's pros and cons to everywhere you live. I found, and we go to the United States yearly. My son was down at school there, and what we found in the United States is that it's far too easy to just get fast food. Like literally, it's everywhere. And even the so-called restaurants are all chain restaurants. So your Applebee's and things like that are just, it's hard to find just good whole food in a restaurant form unless you go to an ethnic restaurant. So for example, we're down in Arizona a lot, go to a Mexican restaurant, and that's great, but it seems like it's one or the other. It's either hardcore chain franchise restaurants, fast food, or it's your mom and pop Mexican Chinese restaurant that's down the road behind in an alley. Accessibility once again. So we talked about universal truths and what you think apply to most humans, if not all. What are some of the myths or improper messaging you're hearing from the nutrition industry that you might say is more propaganda than truth?
Mm. Yeah, I think there are a lot of things. So, firstly, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about just anything that's dogmatic. I think often because people find something that works for them, and then they think that's like the bee's knees and everyone needs to follow it, because they find a study here and there that's supporting their new belief or whatever method they have used. And a study here and there is cool and nice, but it doesn't mean that it's going to work for everyone. And it certainly doesn't mean that it is one of those principles that I mentioned earlier. It could just mean that it's a method. So, for example, if you find a study that's supporting intermittent fasting for weight loss, cool, that's awesome. You do need to look a little bit further, like, how did they lose weight for that? Was, if you had two groups in that study, for instance, did they equate for calories? Because if not, if one group was eating more calories than the other, then the one group would lose more weight.
Yeah.
And were they equating for protein? All these kinds of things. So we want to make sure that whatever we hear is, backed up by a lot of research, let's just say by meta-analyses, or by 20, 30 years of really some fundamental basics, like, let's just say, okay, protein, is it really good for you? How much do we really need? If you look deeper and deeper and deeper and you see what physiological pathways it has and how it supports our body, not just in muscle growth, because that's often how people think about protein. Oh, I only need protein if I want to be jacked and so on. No, what else does it do, right? And so if we look at that, it's just kind of like getting my clients, getting people listening also to think a little bit more for themselves, as opposed to just, oh, I read this newspaper article or I saw that on
Clickbait. Yeah.
whatever news or Instagram or so. I guess going back to your question, I do still see a lot of myths around intermittent fasting, around how carbs are bad for you, or how even seed oils, I guess, is a little bit more nuanced, or things I'll throw things like artificial sweeteners in there, or things like sugar. Because, yeah, I mean, overall, is your life gonna be probably a little bit healthier if you don't have any sugar, if you don't have any seed oils or artificial sweeteners? Probably, but let's look a little bit deeper, because if you start prohibiting yourself sugar completely, we're going back to where I was at, and I'm sure many people listening have been at also, where you just feel super restricted, and then at some point you start binging and you go into that all or nothing thinking, and you're like, tomorrow I'm gonna start back over, so today I have to have everything, and I'm gonna have 3 slices of cake. And that's really what I want people to move away from, that negative relationship with food, having these negative thoughts in regards to their own choices, and also basically bashing themselves for not having the willpower to follow through with that, as opposed to having the grace of like, there's actually nothing wrong if once in a while I am sharing a dessert with my husband on date night and I'm just so thoroughly enjoying that, and then the next day I'm gonna continue with my life as it is. So I think if we start really prohibiting things, it can sometimes be dangerous, or to the point of seed oils. Most of the restaurants that you just mentioned also, they're probably going to cook your steak in seed oils, or they're going to use seed oils for other things. Does that mean you can never go there? I personally don't think so, because let's just say you have your best friend's birthday at one of these restaurants. Do you really want to be the person that's just drinking water, or that says, I can't attend your birthday because you're eating at Applebee's? Sorry about that. Like, what at the end of your life, what do you want your life to be about? Is it living a day longer because you didn't have seed oils that night? Or is it, you have a wonderful evening there, socialize, and you enjoy? I think sometimes we underestimate the psychological benefits of not overthinking things too much. And we've kind of gotten down the route where we're like putting too much emphasis on the small little things, or I guess going into the artificial sweetener is, if you don't need any beverages artificially sweetened, cool, all the power to you. But if you're currently drinking a gallon of Coke every single day, is your life going to be better if you switch to Diet Coke and you lose 50 pounds? Very, very likely. Yes, very likely. So I would rather you do that than continuing on with the Coke. So I think it has to be nuanced, and we always have to look a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I always call that, when you say, like when you had mentioned a gallon of Coke or Coke Zero or Diet Coke, it's the lesser of two evils, I guess you could say. Or I call it shooting the alligator closest to the boat. It's getting rid of the worst thing and at least downsizing it to something that's a little bit better for you, but it's still an alligator, but it's further away, right? So I want to talk about, only because I did an interview last week with a professor, a doctor that wrote her dissertation on the economics of obesity. Very interesting. And I'm going to pose a question, and it might be controversial, but is obesity, and it's rampant in the United States, but is obesity a choice? How do I explain this, Lisa? Like, some people would say, well, people are fat because they've just made bad choices. Okay. Others will say, no, there's certain situations where it's physiological and it doesn't matter what they do, they can't lose weight. I tend to lean more towards it's just it's a choice. Others would argue that. I'm not going to get you to pick a side, but what are your thoughts on that?
I honestly think it's a combination of both, and the distribution of which one is more applicable depends on the person and their circumstances, in my opinion. Because
Okay.
I too, like, if you would have asked me that maybe 5, 6 years ago, I certainly would have said it's all personal responsibility and choice, and many people are just lazy.
Mhm.
And now, after having worked with several hundreds of individuals, I know that what they report as quote unquote food noise is so dependent on the person itself. So some people, they just say like, all I can think about all day long is food. And they're even at like a normal weight sometimes, or they might be obese, but if something is screaming into my ear all day long, you can usually only say no for so long until you kind of cave. And what I have, for instance, heard that all these GLP-1 agonists, etc., help with is really kind of blunting that food noise. And so I think if it's done correctly, if you address lifestyle issues and exercise and protein and food quality and all of this at the same time, I think that they can actually do a lot of good. And again, that would not have been my opinion in the past, because I have often also seen people that grew up in households where food quality was really poor, people that didn't move a lot. They kind of use that more as a shield and a little bit as an excuse of like, oh, everyone in my family is big, I can never lose weight. I don't have time to go to the gym. Oh, there is no good food options. And for me, it is like, nobody's forcing you to put stuff in your mouth, and you're doing that completely on your own. Like, there is a lot of personal responsibility, and it always needs to start with that. And we always need to address the foundations. And if they're all covered, which I have seen before, like people exercising, people really eating low calories overall, which should hypothetically be a calorie deficit for them, and so on. And their hormone profiles just being really, really in a poor place. And therefore, they're having such a hard time losing any weight, and their environment really isn't beneficial for that. So if we have all these things adding up, I really do see how it can be harder for certain people than for others. But in essence, I do think we all need to take responsibility for the cards are not dealt equal, whether it comes to our genetics, whether it comes to where we're born. People around here could just as easily put the finger or point the finger at me and say like, you're rich, you have more money than us because you were born in Germany and you have better opportunities. Yes, all of this is very likely true. But nonetheless, it doesn't help them to rise up and to make the best out of their life. And it doesn't mean that I'm always happy. So we truly need to take personal responsibility and just make the best out of our own situation, no matter what cards we're dealt, I think.
Okay. Is losing weight, can losing weight be as simple as calorie deficit, regardless of the calories?
You mean regardless of
regardless of what the calories are? So 1,000 calories is 1,000 calories, whether it's salad and vegetables or cake.
In essence, my answer would be yes, but, and I'm saying this because in essence, calories is just a measure of unit, just as 60 seconds is a minute, and it is that. You can't really change that. It is what it is. However, the food quality and the distribution of the macros or composition of macros within those calories, they're going to determine a lot how hungry or not you are, how well you're addressing your micronutrients, how much you're supporting your hormones, how good your digestion is. All of that makes it a lot easier. Let's just say if you are eating 500 calories from just, or like you're drinking 500 calories. Let's go back to the example of Coke. You're probably not going to be very satiated from that at all. Whereas if you eat 500 calories from a potato, which is also technically basically just carbs, I challenge you to eat 500 calories from a boiled potato, because that's actually quite hard to do. You're going to feel stuffed after a while. Here we even have the same.
That becomes a volume thing.
Exactly. Now, if we go even deeper and we say, okay, we are looking at the protein again, the protein, which tends to be the most satiating macro, which tends to be harder to digest. So it makes you feel full for longer. And not just that, if you're in a calorie deficit, it's going to help you retain or even possibly build muscle while you're in a calorie deficit, meaning you're more likely to lose more calories from fat than if you just ate the same amount of calories. Again, being in a calorie deficit, you'd probably lose a similar amount of weight, but more of the percentage of that weight loss would come also from lean body mass, from muscle tissue. And again, even if you're listening to this and you don't necessarily want to look jacked, still you should always aim to retain or even build as as much lean body mass as possible in a calorie deficit. Otherwise, you're just going to end up looking sort of skinny fat, sort of flat at the end of your diet. And nobody wants that. We all want to look at the end, kind of have that definition, that quote unquote toned body. And apart from the look, we all need to work on retaining or building more muscle as we age, because pretty much from the age of like 30, mid 30 onwards, your body is going to let go of muscle that you don't need, that you don't use. And you don't want to be a fragile person in your 60s, 70s, or 80s, I assume. I would say that most of us are striving to live autonomous and actively for as long as possible. And so we really need to work on maintaining or retaining that muscle mass. And the two best ways to do that, whether in a calorie deficit or not, are to do some sort of resistance training and to eat sufficient amounts of protein. So yeah, I always want to address protein with my clients for sure.
So I've got a few things I want to explore. Let's go with two that we talked about earlier. Intermittent fasting. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what that actually means. Skipping breakfast is not intermittent fasting. I know that it can be very specific and it's different for everybody. So here, for example, my wife and I decided to do intermittent fasting. Worked really well for me, and I was only on a 14-hour fast, so from 8 p.m. to 10 a.m. And I lost weight right away. Of course, it frustrates her. She goes on a 16-hour, so from 8 p.m. to noon. And by the time noon comes around, she's just like dying, like fading. Didn't really lose a lot of weight on it, frustrated her. So talk to me about intermittent fasting and why it works and then why it doesn't work and maybe what people get wrong about it.
Yeah, awesome. I love the topic because it's actually simpler than most people would think. So in essence, how does it help people lose weight? And some people anyway, it is an opportunity to create a calorie deficit for you. I mean, yeah, you probably ate less or no breakfast at all, and therefore it helped you create that calorie deficit in a reasonably easy way. For her, she may not have created as big of a calorie deficit, maybe a small one through that, and it was efficient enough to really quote unquote spark that weight loss. And for some people, it can actually increase the hunger later on, especially in a lot of women, and therefore it's kind of negating the benefits altogether. On top of that, how it also often doesn't work or kind of puts a handbrake on the weight loss is just by simply adding more stress to the body. And us women, we tend to just generally be more insulin sensitive and have more issues with our hormones, particularly throughout the menopause transition and so on, where hormones are often already out of whack. And so, as you said, she was starving by 12 o'clock and was probably kind of at that place of almost being hangry, maybe having a bit of brain fog, being jittery. You probably didn't want to talk to her at like 11:30, 11:45 because she might have snapped at you. And yeah, that's just a sign that her blood sugar was so low already. And with that, we're actually kind of like bringing up the cortisol even higher. So if she's someone who tends to generally get stressed quite easily about things, who, again, perhaps did have a bit of a hormone dysregulation already going on, that just adds to it. And if we're constantly in a high cortisol state or high stress state, the last thing our body wants to do is letting go of excess body fat, especially around that lower belly kind of section where we have our organs, especially also our sex hormones, sex organs, and that's where we really want to keep them safe. And it's just like, no, I'm stressed. I'm just purely focused on survival. Are you crazy? I'm not going to let go of this body fat. My only job is to keep you alive. And so oftentimes, especially with women, what I see is if we work on reducing overall cortisol load, and that doesn't necessarily have to do with like meal timing always, but it can also be addressing, are you doing the right kind of training? Is that really like, is it stressing you out even more, your body? Or is it actually like helping our goal here? Are you eating regularly enough? Are your portion sizes the right size for you? Are you doing some sort of stress management techniques or even just like mindful breathing, mindful eating, all these kind of things? They seem so small, but they can actually really, really help the body let go of excess body fat as well. And yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's super cool that you and your your perfect representation of what I have seen a lot happening with intermittent fasting, and particularly when the early sort of intermittent fasting studies came out and everyone was thinking like, oh, this is magic. Many of these studies were just done with men. Like that's a lopsided representation of our population. And not just that, but probably also like men between the ages of 20 and 35, because they tend to volunteer more likely as research examples, so to speak, and certainly not women throughout perimenopause that are already in a hormonal imbalance, because that would just be a lot harder to control. So it's unfortunate how that can sometimes blunt the picture that we as a population get of certain practices.
So when you first meet with a client and they've come to you for help in terms of the nutrition, and maybe it's weight loss, I don't know what the situation might be, but how do you initially assess them? Because there can be a lot of different factors. Obviously, you can get a lot of data from blood work. You can get a lot of data from them keeping a dietary diary, say for a couple of weeks, writing down everything they eat, don't eat, and so forth. But how do you assess it? What is your approach to that?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of a combination of what you're mentioning here. Of course, I have a bunch of like questionnaires where I just gain generic data, like how tall they are, what their weight is, but also digging a little bit into like dieting history, because again, that's actually quite important. And what I mean by that is, let's say over the last 10 years, how much of those have you on average been on a diet? Because many of the women I work with, they basically go from like diet to diet to diet, like they diet for the next vacation and then they gain the weight back, and then they diet for their best friend's wedding and then they gain the weight back, and then Christmas comes around and so they diet a little bit before that and then they gain the weight back. And so if we're looking at that and they're spending like 3/4 of the year in a calorie deficit, it already tells me that their metabolism is very likely not going to be in a very receptive place for another diet. So sometimes what we actually have to do for a little while is increase the food and send the body kind of like a safety message of, hey, you can thrive. Let's just work on your hormonal and metabolic health first. And then when we drop back into a properly strategic calorie deficit, it responds a lot better and they feel a lot better throughout. So sometimes that's quite important. And that's why I really want to assess dieting history. And if someone tells me, I've actually never done a diet in my life. I just wanted to do it right the first time around. I'm like, that's awesome. Your body is probably very likely to respond super well to anything we're doing right away. So it's very, very individual. Alongside of that, I do actually ask people to start recording their current food intake, just what they're eating. And I do that with an app. There's lots of like sort of food tracking apps these days. MyFitnessPal, My Macros, Carbon, whatever you want. And they all do the same thing. They give you an opportunity to just be real with yourself, because sometimes I also hear I eat like one meal a day and I'm not losing any weight. And then when people start paying more attention, it's like, okay, they're not really eating breakfast, but they're finishing off half of their child's muffin after they get done. They're not really eating breakfast, but they have Starbucks with whipped cream and some sugar. They're not really eating lunch, but they're snacking on something else. They're not really having an afternoon meal, but so it kind of like it accumulates. And then the one meal that they thought they had, which is hypothetically chicken salad, half of that is cheese and dressing and croutons and nuts, and you're like, this is like a 1,500 calorie salad. Add the Starbucks and whatever to that, you're easily at 2,500 calories. So it brings awareness to them. Even like I've come from a place where I thought like, I'm eating so healthy, why am I not looking like I'm working out or losing any weight or so? And I just thought eating healthy is everything. And I didn't consider that eating an avocado and 4 eggs and salmon and drizzling that with olive oil can also add up and put me into a calorie deficit, right? So tracking your food that way, just because of the awareness, often actually without me even giving someone a new calorie target or a new protein target or whatever, even just that sometimes can initiate weight loss, because it teaches you what's truly a high calorie food, what's a lower calorie food, what's a good source of protein. I thought peanut butter was a good source of protein. Turns out it has like 2 grams for a teaspoon, like this
Yeah.
is not a good source of protein, right? So it's for me, it's more than anything, it's a tool to educate people on what's in their food and how big a portion really should be for someone. So that's kind of our starting base. And then, of course, a lot comes out through conversation, regular conversation as well, because someone is not going to disclose to me in our initial conversation that they are having or going through a rough patch in their marriage. And on top of that, they have a lot of work stress and they actually right now hate their life. That comes out over weeks and weeks of building a connection and creating a foundation so that eventually they're opening up to me why they're binging every Friday evening when it's the only night that they have to kind of relax and they just want to this de-stress from everything else. And so we can then start to address those underlying reasons that are really holding them back as well.
Yeah, it's never been easier to educate yourself on proper nutrition, understanding calories, macros. Macros has now become ubiquitous. It's in everyone's language, it seems. Yet people choose to avoid educating themselves on that. And that's where I go back to my comment on unhealthy choices and habits tend to be their choices. They choose to just kind of, if I can't see it and I don't know about it, it's not a problem. Um, let's move on to another slightly more controversial topic, but I want to talk about GLP-1s and Ozempic, and I have a basic understanding of what it does. Like you said, it basically it dulls the hunger center in your brain, or in your stomach really, and it basically causes people to eat less. But it's maybe too early to know what the side effects are going to be, long-term side effects. What is your knowledge of it? What it does? What are you seeing that is positive, where it can be used positively, and where are you seeing it being used in a negative way?
Yeah, I will say straight away, it's definitely not my area of expertise.
Yeah.
I personally have not recommended it to anybody in particular or anything like that. Nonetheless, I have also spoken with several experts that are practitioners that are quote unquote helping people with it.
Yeah.
And my overall view on it is that, again, like if you address lifestyle at the same time and you get people to work out, you get people to eat a higher protein diet, can be a strategy for a certain amount of time. And if you then have someone who's guiding you to like wean off of it slowly in the right dosages, I have seen people have success with it, not under my guidance, but
Mm.
again, under someone else's. I do think the dangers are that really many people are gaining the weight back when they come off of it because they can't financially take it long term, or the nausea is just overwhelming and they don't want to deal with it long term. So, I mean, that, in my opinion, anything that doesn't have either an exit strategy or that is not sustainable is kind of like you should ask yourself, why are you doing that in the first place? Because if it's just something that's helping you get to your goal weight by your friend's wedding in fall, and then you're planning on gaining the weight back, for me, that would be a complete waste of money and a potential danger to your health. So I think really what we've also seen is that quite often people lose a big amount of lean body mass as well in not addressing the protein, not addressing the lifestyle in the sense of starting to resistance train and so on. So I think no matter what, the foundations always need to be laid out. And if you're just getting the GLP-1 agonist over the counter or like through a dodgy sort of source, and you are not dosing it the right way, you are not tailoring it to you, it could be like really dangerous in that way. So I would never want to see people do it on their own without any professional guidance, and again, without any exit strategy or even just a long-term plan.
Let's bring our two worlds together here. And like I said, I've been in and around the health and fitness industry my entire life, just because I was in sports growing up, and then I was at a Division 1 college in the United States, and then professional football. So you learn, and once again, this is 40 years ago. So the knowledge back then wasn't as great, but still I had some knowledge of macros. Like I knew what carbs and protein and fats were, and understanding what to eat, what not to eat, especially being a high performance athlete. But when I say let's bring our worlds together, and you're talking about dieting, nutrition, and the clients you work with, and then what we believe here in effort is everything, results are more byproduct. So effort over results. So what strategies do you employ with your clients to help them overcome the all or nothing mentality associated with dieting, where it's like you even mentioned, it's like, I'll take the Ozempic just to lose weight for the wedding, and then what happens after doesn't matter. Nothing is sustainable, it seems, in the dieting world. And I believe that the concept of the effort over results matches nicely with that in the messaging that would go with diet and nutrition, that this isn't going to happen overnight. We're not going to worry about the number that's on the scale right now. We literally just going to make micro changes to how you eat day to day, and the results are going to happen, but let's not focus on an end goal like a pound or kilogram that's on the weight on the scale and things like that. So what strategies do you employ to reinforce that it's more about the effort discipline of day-to-day changes than what the end goal is?
Yeah, I love everything that you just said. And I think sometimes that's quite harsh when people hear that initially, because of course they contact me and they're like, I've gained this and that much and I want to drop to this particular weight. And often when we have our conversations, then I do dig into like, okay, why this specific weight? Is there a particular reason? And quite often it turns out that, let's just say if someone has like 130 pounds in their mind, I'm like, when you were 130 pounds last time, what was going on in your life during that time? Maybe
Great
you're just
question.
wanting to get back to that mindset. Maybe you were like at a really great time in your life. It was like your honeymoon phase or whatever it might be. And then so kind of like thinking about the life circumstances and how we can also kind of include a little bit more of that version of you into their current life, because maybe they suddenly stopped doing anything that they liked doing in their life, and now they're just existing for their family and having neglected themselves completely. So that's one thing. And like speaking of their version of them, I also pretty much from the beginning on try to make it very clear that if they want to see change, they're going to have to change. And like while that seems logical and people are like yes, it doesn't actually sink through for a lot of people. So for example, if you're currently in the habit of binge drinking and socializing every Friday and Saturday, cutting your sleep short, watching Netflix until a certain amount of time, and so on. That's probably not things we can bring into that version of you that weighs those 130 pounds or so. Your life is going to have to change and it's going to feel hard, and that's going to have to be the case long term if you want to sustain that. And so that's sometimes really hard to accept in the moment. And in those initial conversations, most of the time people are like, yeah, sure. But when it actually comes to the point of like, okay, we're losing certain friends, or maybe now, like sometimes, especially in relationships, start seeing that one person is wanting to grow and to advance and to improve, and the other person almost sees that as an attack on them, or as they try to hold them back, and suddenly they come home every Friday night with a huge pizza and the pint of ice cream, and you're like, but I told you I wanted to lose weight. And it's kind of their attempt of like, or their fear of, I'm losing you as a partner, I might not, maybe I'm no longer good enough for you. And that can sometimes be tough. Like people lose their best friends or what they thought were their best friends when they change. But it is often about like guiding them through that and making sure that they find their new tribe at the end of it. Because in essence, if we want to change, we need to adapt a new identity. And that's really a lot of what I work with clients on also, like thinking about if you're tempted to eat something, thinking about number one, is that something I will have enjoyed 3 hours from now also? Would I be happy with the choice that I make? Tomorrow, would I be happy that I made that choice? Or what would that higher version, that different version of me choose between those two things? And if you put yourself into that situation and you think more of like the person I want to become chooses steak and potatoes rather than the fries and the burger and the Coke. The person that I want to become, yes, gets up every morning and moves their body. So more thinking in like what does the person that I want to become do? And then slowly and gradually leaving that old version of you behind. And it truly like it goes so much deeper than just we're gonna change one habit here or there. Yes, that's often how it starts, to your point of leaving that the sports bag at the door or so. Yeah, sometimes that's how it can start if someone is currently not moving at all and they're having such a big obstacle between them and going to the gym, and like going 3 times a week for half an hour seems super daunting. Literally, that's what we can start with, of like, just put your shoes on, sit down in the car. That's the first goal for the first week. And if you can do that
There you
every
go.
day, I'm happy, I'm celebrating you, and this was our win for the week, right? And then building on that very gradually, because exactly to your point, quite often we just want too much too soon, and it's not sustainable, and it feels like something we just want to do for 6 or 8 or 12 weeks. But then after that is like going back to who you were previously, and it would never last that way.
Hmm. I love that you brought that up again, putting your gym bag by the door. Interesting story. So my daughter was a high performance athlete, went to the University of the United States for discus on a scholarship. That was 2019-20 though. Then COVID hits. She comes home because they're not competing. Nobody's doing anything. You can't go to the gym. So she goes from a high performance athlete to a 20-year-old who now is basically sedentary. She stopped going to the gym for a few years. I think she only just started going back here in the last 6 months, so 4 years. But one of the messages I said to her was that putting your gym bag by the door. Like she lived in the gym during high school, and her and I would work out together too. And I felt really bad that she wasn't doing that. So to try to get her to go back to the gym with me, I said, "Hey, let's go once a week. How about that?" And then I thought, and that didn't even work, Lisa. Like once a week, it seems like so little, but she would always find a way to weasel out of that, right, on Sundays. So I thought, okay, well, how about this? I said, Annika, how about we just go to the gym and watch people work out? And I said, so we sat in the massage chairs with our Tim Hortons coffee, and we just watched people work out, because I thought sometimes it's about environment, right? It's about just getting to that building, that place where you need to be to start, right? And we did that for a few weeks. We just grabbed our coffees, drove to the gym, sat in the massage chairs, and watched people work out. And the second week, she's like, he's using terrible form on those deadlifts. And then it was like, I can lift more than she can. And you know what? And just that environment change kind of got her moving. And it was incredible how, and for some people, it doesn't matter what you're trying to accomplish, just change your environment, put yourself in the position to at least take that first step. So it's putting the gym bag by the door, and then maybe it's in the vehicle, and then now it's okay, I'm going to drive by the gym every day. Okay, now I'm going to watch people work out. So funny stories, and it's, you could call it life hacks, tricks, whatever you want to call it. But for so many people, especially people who are reticent to go to the gym because they are overweight, they're embarrassed, they don't want to be there. They're shy, whatever it is. You've got to find those little breadcrumbs, I call them, to get people to feel like, okay, I can take this first step. But everyone's so focused on what that scale says. Everyone's so focused on that 130 pound, whatever it is, or maybe a weight they want to lift. Just put in the work. Just put in the
Or
effort.
exactly. No, I love everything about that story. And really, I mean, Habits is a book that I recommend to like basically
Everybody.
all clients or anyone
Yeah.
listening, really, because it is those small things. And doing something routinely, consistently is gonna get you so much further. Like to your point of trying to go once a week and like trying to have that perfect workout that one time, not as effective as in the long run, even just watching people at the gym for a little while consistently. So no, I think that's super, super cool. And just really working on your habits or anything that you want to change in that way. And I guess it's not directly linked to that, but I think sometimes we get really hung up on perfectionism and overlooking how much the small things can do. Like even if we transfer that over to nutrition again, like thinking about the exact perfect calories or the exact perfect protein or what everything needs to look like perfectly. And let's just think about what you can add to your current food that you're doing at the moment that would make it that 1% better. And for most people, that's going to be focusing on having more vegetables, having more protein, and not being hyper focused on can't have that at all. I should feel guilty about having that glass of wine yesterday. And I think by focusing more on the things that we should be doing more of or having more of, we are putting more of a positive spin on it, and it's not feeling as negative as something you have to do, as something that's like, ugh, a burden, than just something that enhances your life in that way.
So let's move over to what you're doing now. Let's talk about the podcast and how you're trying to reach out because you have clients. It sounds like all over the world, which is wonderful. And I want to talk about that and how you manage that virtually. But let's talk about how are you trying to get the word out there, not only for what you're doing specifically, but just healthier lifestyle and nutrition in general. What are the channels you're using? How are you getting it out there? And the podcast. Who are the types of guests you bring on the podcast?
Awesome. Yeah, so my podcast is called the Nutrition and Life Podcast, and most of the guests I have on are either researchers in the exercise science and nutrition space, or they are coaches themselves. And sometimes I have specific themes. At the moment, we are having Menopause May and just talking about how to support women as best as possible throughout that time, bringing out episodes and guests and that specialize in those kinds of things. And aside from that, I try to put out valuable information with my daily Instagram posts, weekly newsletters, on LinkedIn as well. Those are really the main platforms people can find me. I do have a YouTube channel as well where I have the podcast with video as well and some additional like exercise videos and so on. So that's really the main thing. I also try to just show a little bit of my life, mostly on Instagram, because I think I don't just want to be an educator. I want to show people also that I also go through struggles. We're all human. We also have our ups and downs. And I think that's what life is about. We want to fit our nutrition as best as possible around a life that we love. And we don't want to go about nutrition in the way of like putting our life on hold, or I guess it really restricting our life and then just like, oh, this is my perfect life here. I eat out of Tupperware so and so many days and it doesn't bother me at all. And if you're not able to do the same thing, even though you have 3 kids and a full-time job, then shame on you. No, I think it needs to become from a place of like people connecting with me in that way as well and just seeing my human side. And I'm hopefully being able to learn a little bit from that or being inspired by that. That's really kind of what I try to do with it.
You had brought up people with busy schedules, and I think about when I'm traveling, that's generally when my nutrition diet goes to hell. I try to bring my greens with me. I try to smuggle my supplements across the border when I go into the United States, but it's very difficult especially if you're flying a lot, if you're on the road a lot, it's hard to do that. How do you work with people who have extremely busy, maybe they're just parents, multiple kids, they're taxiing their kids to and from sports during the day. It's tough to manage that. So how do you manage people with really busy schedules, and what are some, short of saying life hacks, but simple
Mhm.
2 or 3 things that they can do that are almost fail safe, meaning they can apply it to their lives even though they're busy?
Yeah, that's a great question because, like you said, most people these days are very, very busy. And I think the overarching theme is simplifying and outsourcing. So, 2 things. Often I get asked, oh, what's the best? Do you have any breakfast recipes or dinner recipes for this? And I'm like, let's not worry about any recipes right now. Let's just think about what is a protein source you like, what's a vegetable or fruit that you like, and then what do we want to add to that. So having like 3 ingredient meals is so much easier to think about, and you just think, oh, okay, I have Greek yogurt, I have some berries, and I'm going to add some nuts to that. I have some chicken, I have some broccoli, and I'm going to add some potatoes to that. So much easier than if you try to follow and prep a recipe with 20 different ingredients, half of which you don't even know what they are, and then the method takes you like half an hour to read. So simplifying, and for people that are really, really busy, I think even utilizing something like meal prep delivery, or even something simple like getting your groceries delivered might cost an extra $5. But instead of going to the supermarket with your 2 kids while you're tired already and the kid is cranky and is just yelling for chips and whatever, you're so much better off like shopping from home and just having those groceries brought to your doorstep. I think also having like a few go-to meals goes such a long way. I mean, in essence, us rotate between similar breakfasts and lunches most of the time, and we don't tend to get too bored of that, having maybe a little bit more flexibility with your dinner. But once you've figured out like 2, 3 go-to breakfast options that you can prepare within 3 minutes, and then 2, 3 lunch options, and just having them on repeat, that can get you a long way. Like the studies show quite clearly that people that successfully maintain a healthy body weight, they actually eat the same things most of the time. And I don't mean to say like food needs to be super boring. I just mean to say like don't overcomplicate it and don't always think of like, oh, what am I craving right now? That's something that you can think about like on a Sunday when you have a leisure day and you don't need to, and you actually have time to enjoy that food. But during the week, not every single meal needs to be the most delicious, most satisfying meal. Sometimes food really just needs to taste decently and kind of do the job if you only have like 10 minutes to shove it in anyway, right? So again, like keeping it simple. And I guess on that front also, basically spending a little bit of time in preparation goes a really long way long term too. And I mean, that applies to budget, that applies to work and everything else that we do also. So why not apply the same thing to nutrition? So I mean by that, sometimes people think they're magically going to come across that next perfectly portioned out and wonderfully nutritious meal. We do need to have a little bit of foresight, and meal prep can be very simple. So basically, if you spend 20 minutes on a Sunday afternoon cooking up 2, 3 protein sources, maybe a couple of carb sources and vegetables, and then playing mix and match over the course of the week, that could be a good strategy. If you don't have or don't want to make time for that, even just having some frozen veggies in the freezer, getting your pre-cooked chicken strips that you can heat up and microwave rice. Is it 100% optimal as well as just as optimal as cooking it fresh? Maybe not, but it's not always about being optimal. It's about being practical and taking, again, like shooting the closest alligator to the boat and just being like, and this is better than getting takeout, or this is better than McDonald's. So we're going to go for the microwave rice, even if there might be whatever preservative in there. So yeah, I think that a little bit of foresight and simplicity, they can go a really long way.
You you sparked something in my mind. I found that the Gen Z generation, so for example, my kids are in their 20s, and so they're part of that Gen Z generation. There's a disturbing trend of they are the Uber Eats, DoorDash, skip the dishes generation, and that once they live on their own, they start to order in everything. Now, maybe I'm generalizing, but it seems to me like both my kids have done that. They tell me their friends do it. I realize it's because it's become easy to do that. And they would rather spend $25 on having food brought to them than to go and spend $25 or let's say $100 in groceries and then make their own meals. Do you think that there's like what do you think was the impetus behind that trend happening? It's the availability of the apps online, quick order done, but psychologically there has to be a reason for that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I truly think it is the ease, like just in general, the culture being like everything needs to be easier, needs to be that illusion of it being faster and being less complicated. Fortunately, as you and I know, like less complicated or less effortful doesn't necessarily mean better. I mean, you
No.
can also like if you go to the gym and you avoid walking everywhere or whatever, does that make it better? No, it really doesn't. And same thing is with nutrition. Unfortunately, like as we prepare food also, we're already sort of stimulating the whole digestive system, the smell, your
Mm,
eyes, like your body's literally preparing to take in that food. Now, if you just wait for your delivery, you open up the thing, you're foregoing the whole body preparation, mind preparation, where you're putting your body into a rest and digest system where it can fully uptake those nutrients best as possible. And on top of that, I mean, many other things. On top of that, you'd never learn how to prepare the food properly. You don't learn how to like how big is 6 ounces of chicken breast really, because you never weigh that out. It's just arriving in front of you, and you don't really know. Has this restaurant used 4 ounces or is this 8 ounces? I don't know. So by weighing out food or by preparing your own food, we're actually learning a lot about the food itself as well. And then, of course, even if a restaurant might indicate their calories, their macros, and so on, the person preparing it there is probably a college student or whatever. They don't care if they use 3 tablespoons of oil
yeah.
or half a cup. It's not as accurate anymore. Yeah, unfortunately, the more we kind of like eat food that's prepared by a restaurant, unfortunately, the harder it does make weight loss in my personal experience, and again from working with several hundred of people as well. So if we can keep that to a minimum, and I don't mean to never eat out. I like going to restaurants like the next person, but I think what I want to encourage people to do is more that to use that as a special occasion and to use that as something that you look forward to. You know, you plan out the meal, maybe you use it as a date night or you go with your best friend and just like celebrating it more for the experience as opposed to like the food itself. And then it can be totally part of a healthy lifestyle and diet.
Yeah. So let's wrap up with a couple fun questions here. I want to know about, and you don't have to use names, but tell me a client story, someone you worked with where it would bring tears to people's eyes, meaning like the transformation was incredible, and they are something that should be a story that really should be put on Instagram, should be put on social media to show that, this is possible, that, with effort, you can achieve anything. So give me a client story that really is just close to your heart.
Well, a client who's actually, like many of my clients, kind of evolved into a really good friend over the course of time as well. And similar to many other of my client stories, she was someone who she worked hard at the gym. Like certainly most of my clients, they're not afraid of hard work. They actually often do too much when it comes to exercise. They don't do the right thing when it comes to exercise. So kind of like your spin cycle class for an hour and a half every single day, and on top of that trying to do some weights and then rushing to work and doing their 12-hour job there and thinking that they're eating healthy. And simply by educating her on that more exercise is not necessarily better. It is about like, are we doing the right thing? It's not just about the doing something. And same thing with food. She thought, oh, she's eating so healthy, and just like me, she felt super restricted. She was like, she was a bit overweight and just thought like, I'm so unhappy in my body. I'm working so hard though. Why is this not like I feel like I can't eat less or don't want to eat less because I'm working so hard. I can't do more. I don't have the time to work out 3 hours in the gym. So like where you just feel like I'm putting so much effort in and putting so much effort in and I'm not getting anywhere. And I think that's so frustrating for people that are, ambitious, that are motivated to do stuff. And you just feel like there's going to be a different method. So anyway, just by educating her on, again, food portions, food quality or quantity rather, and the right macro distribution, pulling back her training, addressing things like stress management and so on. She has not just like dropped body fat, but also just learned to bring that into her lifestyle overall, and that mentality of like it's not about hard work necessarily working harder but smarter in many many things, and seeing her maintain that weight loss over the course of like I was so fortunate to be invited to her wedding in Lebanon. She's originally from Iran but lives in Dubai, and so I was fortunate to attend the wedding. By now she has a child, a beautiful baby boy, and was able to navigate her own weight loss again post partum and everything else. Like she only worked with her for about a year and a half, and we've kind of stayed in touch a little bit since then. I think 4 years have passed since then, and like seeing how she has gained the tools to truly navigate her life after that is wonderful. And she feels that food freedom that I was explaining to you earlier as well when it comes to her own travels, because she travels a lot for her work with Google all over Europe and stuff. And so yeah, that to me, even though it's not necessarily like a glamorous, oh, that person lost 50 or 100 pounds sort of story. It's just a story for me where I know that she's gained a lot of life quality, and that she's gained a lot of knowledge, and that she'll benefit from for the rest of her life. That honestly means a lot to me.
Okay. Here's some fun questions for you. 2 food items that everyone should have in their fridge.
Oh, okay.
Barring allergies, barring allergies. But yeah, 2 food items that everybody should absolutely have in the house.
The first one, I will say more generally something green. So that can be, if someone likes broccoli or if they like, maybe not that, maybe not that, a whole food item that is green.
Okay.
Green foods just tend to be higher in, or very high in micronutrients. And something like broccoli is also wonderful for our digestion, for helping our detoxification. Like, yeah, something that's green. And the second food item should be something along the lines of like eggs or, egg white, some sort of a protein source like that. I think eggs are actually really underrated. They have
Yeah.
a wonderful micronutrient profile and super cheap. So in my eyes, they're actually somewhat of a superfood, even though, yeah, it seems so basic.
Okay. Two food items in the house that people should throw out right now.
Okay, some sort of high calorie sauce or condiment. So it
Okay.
might be like I don't know, a ranch dressing that's like just a store-bought ranch dressing or so.
Darn it.
Not that it's not that it's the devil. I have just often seen people ruin a perfectly great meal by adding half a cup of whatever dressing to that unnecessarily, where they could. I think we can find and gain a lot of flavor from like herbs and spices and lower calorie condiments like sriracha sauce or mustard or lemon or soy sauce or so, and saving ourselves a lot of calories that way, and or making more space to get those calories from other more nutritious sources.
Okay. What does your daily supplement protocol look like? What is on your counter for supplements and vitamins and things like that?
Right. I have like a baseline stack that I pretty much always have, and that's things like creatine, omega, magnesium, most of the time a vitamin D. I mean, I'm fortunate to live somewhere where it's a lot warmer than where you are most of the
Yeah.
time, but nonetheless, I don't always get to go into the sun. So
Okay.
I do sometimes take a vitamin D. And then I have more the nice to haves that I personally, I see myself sometimes a bit as like an experiment as well. So I add in things like ashwagandha and see how that affects me or my stress management. Add in things like maca or selenium or a zinc and so on, depending on what my life looks like at the time as well, and just sort of have them as nice little bonuses. But yeah, omega-3, magnesium, vitamin D, and creatine, they're pretty much always in there.
Excellent. Excellent. I have pretty much everything that you just mentioned on the counter. So I feel I
Awesome.
must be doing something good. Who is, okay, final fun question. Who is your nutritional Yoda? Who is that guru, that person that you just like for me it was the Andrew Huberman thing and then Peter Attia, but who is your nutritional guru that you follow, that you just look to for inspiration and you think they're just doing a great job educating people on nutrition and life?
I don't think I have like one specific guru. I have two researchers, which I think are doing a fabulous job translating the research, the more sort of nerdy speak, into coaches or everyday person's language. And the first person is Dr. Bill Campbell. He has a wonderful research review, which is called Body by Science. He really focuses on anything fat loss and muscle gain related. And the other one is Dr. Alan Aragon. He also has a research review, which I believe is called the Alan Aragon Research Review. So yeah, they do a fantastic job of translating that kind of specific information. I'll throw in a third person. I
Yeah.
really do like Dr. Lane Norton. He
Yes.
is, yeah, he's been on the Huberman lab a few times, also
Yeah.
Peter Attia's as well. He's a little bit more quote unquote aggressive
He's
in the sense of
polarizing, very
yeah.
polarizing. Yeah.
I do like his general philosophy of like simplifying things on and thinking about the big rocks rather than the small sort of petals. So yes, I will add him as a third person.
Excellent, excellent. I love all those names. I'm going to look those up. Let's finish up. Where can people find you? Let's promote your socials. Let's promote where people can find you, your services, and the what you bring to the table, literally and figuratively. But where can people find you?
Well, thank you so much, Quinn, for having me. Honestly, I've
Mhm.
really enjoyed this conversation. The best place to find me is probably on Instagram at Nutrition Coaching and Life. It's the same name for our website, nutritioncoachingandlife.com. Same name on LinkedIn and on YouTube as well. Anyone who's listening to this and who enjoys this podcast, please reach out to me, even just dropping me a line and saying, "Hey, I heard you in Quinn Talk and I like the conversation." I also have a few freebies if you hit me up. We have something like a toned body template, like a PDF that's just a nice foundational guideline, or some free training programs. So yeah, anyone listening who's enjoying this, just get in touch and I'll send you something.
Wonderful. Well, Lisa Franz, it was amazing having you here today. I could talk to you for hours on this stuff, and I had another 6 or 7 questions I wanted to go into, but I think we covered a really good span of what I think people wanted to hear. And I think the messaging is keep it simple. Find what works for you. Work with a professional if you can afford to, and work with people that can help you get that education and get that information on you specifically as a human and your metabolism and your physiology. And that's why I like having guests like you on the show, so we can bring this information and let people choose what they want to go with. So once again, Lisa, thank you for being on the show, and we hope to have you on in the future.
Thank you so much.